スーパーサイヤ人は孫悟空さん一人じゃない。ここにもいたということだ。
貴様が俺を倒すだと見せてみよう、愚かなサイヤ人よ。小賢しい。アンナ、大丈夫ですか？驚き者は破れるとは。
貴様が相手。無駄だ。
僕が相手だ。無駄です。カメハメ。どうだ。さあ間に合って。終わりにしてやる。
Good evening, everyone. We now have a lot of sound checks finally finished with, and therefore we are on stream. It probably wasn't necessarily all that worth it, given that we don't plan to be talking that much on this stream today. But as always, we are having our Kame House lobby, as it is Thursday. So join us for some Dragon Ball Fighters. Specifically, this is probably the last launch we will have for this year before they make any changes to the game system. That is, we are expecting next week's Kame House to be after all of the updates across all of the systems and all of the new mechanics that will bring to the game. For today, that means that a lot of our players are going to be at least somewhat focused on what those changes might mean for them. And in at least one case, we have a player who will actually be using a different theme, more so to test that out as a general thing though, than specifically related to anything on that side. We're expecting a lot of changes and a lot of things. Specifically, the character to be coming is Kefla, which we're kind of expecting, though we weren't necessarily expecting her to become available before Ultra Instinct Goku. But the big thing that everyone's talking about is the fact that you will be able to choose your assist soon. For every character at the screen as well. How exactly this will probably work when you are playing this level, when you normally just confirm and you don't have to select characters at all, we will see, but usually the games give you a little in-between space to choose things like V trigger, and I guess in this case maybe also choose your assist for each character for the matchup you're facing. One way or another, this is going to be new and possibly interesting. For many people this sort of thing just gets confusing, but it does allow for a lot of creativity. And if you had a team before that you were not sure was going to work out for you because of their lack of synergy with assists in some way, even if you've learned to play that team without specifically using the assists, you should still be able to find something to do with whatever options they give you. Even if it's just discovering slightly new combos. Will probably open up a new world of conversions in situations where you might not otherwise have been able to get maximum damage, even though you otherwise had all of the advantage. But for this week, all of that is just still theoretical, as is any effect we would be seeing from things like the supposed take-throw setup, or any other mechanical changes to the game at all. You can join us in US East Coast Lobby 2, Ring Match Priority Lobby 02. And of course we are standing in front of Kame House. You should be looking for the Boma there. This lounge does have a passcode and it is in Neither Stays On. Passcode is usually available somewhere in our tweet or occasionally in the stream title, but if you're listening, it is 2717.
Showdown is about to begin!
As noted, this lounge is Neither Stays On, but once you have enough people in the lounge, that usually means that the winner of any given match will play again sooner than those who are defeated, meaning that in this case you will get your turn, and you won't necessarily have to play the strongest person in the room. But that strongest person will be able to fight more people and give them experience. Expect to see therefore a lot of shifts around once there's basically 5 people in the lounge. Any odd number will generally cause the same effect. When there's an even number of people in the lounge, it's more likely that you're going to see someone shift or drift out of their position so that we end up with more different matchups. This week, Cosmo's testing will probably be focused around playing characters in this game in similar ways to how Nakali is played, specifically looking for that spot where you can read the opponent's movements, see that they have moved, and react super quickly based on being naturally primed, let's say. And of course, if you have the spacing, a lot of these things just work out in terms of making sure that you catch your opponent unawares. Still, it's going to take a little bit more than that to get through Omni Rabbit's defense. And as he's not a very mashy player in general until you get to a specific point of the match, there's not necessarily going to be a lot of chances to read his movement either. While this isn't technically a strain, it is still something that Cosmic Wolf has to think about. And thinking in this situation can be, go so far as to say, crippling. Still, since two of the characters in this team are the same as usual, understanding the styles isn't going to be that hard. And being able to play in a different style when necessary often comes up in fighting games. A judicious use of meter did not pay off as much as one might hope, but in this case we're back to the learning experience part. We'll probably be reviewing next week the concepts of how to use certain assists, at least the ones that we are likely to be seeing on stream, more directly in terms of doing conversions that might not otherwise have been possible, or even offense tactics that might not have been possible, which is what you can probably expect to hear about all over the internet. It's likely that pressure and stronger offense or longer combos will be the main focus of many of the main content you'll see for the game, meaning that we'll probably just go the other way and cover anything that has to do with landing a conversion from an unexpected situation.
Let's go!
少々派手にやりすぎたか。
Time to begin the match!
Black, 俺は貴様を許さない。
Get ready!
Being able to distill a game down to just a few interactions that you understand, possibly even from other games, is an important skill, especially when the game changes in some way. That's going to be one of the main things people end up needing to do or understand in this game once we do get changes. Because at that point, even taking stuff about the game you already understood can end up feeling as if you need to do something else. And in this game, that's usually not true. It's actually a very simple game in most positions, and you have to only understand whether or not your spacing and timing for the attack is correct or not. Learning to confirm your combos and do bigger damage is of course important for improving your gameplay as a whole later on, but in the strict sense, you really only need to be able to do two things at most points of Dragon Ball Fighters. Deflect your opponent if you think is necessary, and move into the correct position to launch your next attack. Using your assist correctly obviously falls under BD mashup, everything else that we mention all of the time. All of these things are important for long-term goals in play, but the moment-to-moment discussion of what you should be doing in your head comes down to just two things at a time, almost always. In fact, if you find yourself thinking that this game is about doing too many things when you're first starting out, it's almost certain that you're not going to be good enough at it, mainly because your opponent, who probably will do simpler things or at least will have a better idea of what they want to do at any given moment, will eventually manage to trick you. Even if you've got fairly good combos and damage, being tricked is not something you easily get away from. This is particularly meaningful for Cosmic Wolf because this game is based on the same core principles that playing Nikali is. You hit stand heavy in neutral when you want to keep your opponent away from you. You hit crouch heavy when you want to anti-air them. You even get a dash up command grab in the form of the Dragon Rush, even though you probably want to move a little bit in order to get it done. And you have moves that take you across the screen if you're playing the right characters. The problem with this game is that because it does not allow for certain things, you actually end up finding it harder simply because your opponent is expecting exactly those things at almost all times. This is in fact a problem we see in multiple of our team members in this game. Because this game is easier, because there is very little ambiguity when you don't know a lot of pressure strings or combos yet, it's easy to get into the situation of thinking that the situation is worse than it is, or that you need to do more than you actually need to do. And of course, it makes any bad decision you actually do make much more frustrating, because subconsciously you're usually very aware that you didn't need to do the thing you did, but can come to the impression that if you don't do that, what else would you have done?
The battle's about to start. Good luck.
This is actually a relatively large problem for fighting game players starting out as a generality. If you get to the point of feeling like you don't know what would even work, then any decision you make that is not good, like blatantly not a good decision, tends to get swept under the rug or justified as, well, I couldn't have done anything else anyway. And this is not altogether a bad way to think about it, because a lot of the time if someone is trying to tell you, well, you shouldn't have done that, it's not really helpful unless they're offering you something you should have done. Most of the time, they're not. A lot of the time, your only aim would have been to keep quiet and do nothing, and that gets boring if you have no good ideas. You can get fairly high up with this too. It's entirely possible to end up thinking to yourself, I don't know what to do because I don't have the level of skill required to do anything in this game, so I should either do random things or not play. It's important not to get trapped in this, specifically because if you think of the game as something you can't do anything in or can't do anything about, the result is almost always going to be not only frustration, but not being able to pay attention to the little things that you actually could do better in some way. This is especially true in Dragon Ball FighterZ since so much of the match is flashy and large and technically can be overwhelming. And it doesn't do as well as most games with less abstractions. There are things exploding everywhere, and beams, and combos that you don't know the exact ending point of. And extra conversions people can do sometimes and can't do other times. Which all ties into a feeling of, okay, I couldn't have done anything anyway. Or, one of the other serious problems that fighting gamers face, making a bad decision and then it taking so long to get the full negative effect of that bad decision that you really can't easily remember it while you're still playing. In simpler games, if you make a bad decision and get hit with a super, that is basically immediate. You go, okay, that was bad, and I got hit with this big flashy move. In this game, it's harder to tell because the first thing that hits you when you make a mistake is not usually the big flashy move immediately. There's often something smaller that happens first because the combos are longer. Or, the same situation doesn't lead to the same level of punishment every time when you mess it up, because your opponent might not have enough resources to do the big punish every time. This doesn't really change the situation though, other than making it hard to make sure that you know anything. As the player, therefore, you can take a little bit of what we try to teach when playing Under Night. It should be updating like right now. When something bad does start to happen to you, most of the time, you're not going to know exactly how to flip out or bounce out or recover properly to avoid the situation anyway. If you did, you were probably much more confident to begin with, and this wasn't really a concern. Meaning that you mostly might as well hold some direction, up, down, whatever, and simply allow the combo to finish while you think about the thing that went wrong that made you get hit by it in the first place. This is hard to do, because most of us don't want to spend large periods in the game thinking about what we did wrong in it. But if you are interested in playing this type of game, that's what you're going to get. Any game with long enough combos is basically just you getting to contemplate a mistake you made for 10 to 20 seconds. And some people find that sort of thing really fun, or at least comforting in that they don't have to constantly readjust to the next scenario immediately. But since some of it does involve resets and confusion, it is absolutely true that this can turn out that way for you. Still, it's probably not worth your effort at first, or later on, honestly, once you've gotten good enough. You made a decision, and that decision led to things. Or you got pushed to a position, and that position is not good for you. And you didn't necessarily spend too much time thinking about how you got pushed there. Why am I cornered? Why am I too far out to get back in on my opponent? Why did my stand heavy whiff? All of these things are the real things that tell you if you're doing well in this game or not. Unfortunately, they bear with them a lot of ambiguity in the sense of when you try to do something and it just doesn't work out because your opponent moved out of the way, but you've seen them not move out of the way before, and you don't know whether or not they could do it every time. That is the part of the game where experience and long periods spent playing actually pay off. You get to spend more time understanding whether or not your opponent can consistently get out of something you were doing. but it still does mean that you have to at least consider whether or not your reaction or lack thereof counts as a mistake. This game feels fast-paced, but really, it isn't. It's only fast-paced once you've gotten good enough to have long sequences of blocking. And most of us are absolutely not there. This is why our bots for this game focus so heavily on people's ability to track information, or just about anything else the opponent does.
クリリンさん、引退しても力を衰えていないな。僕も見習わなくちゃ。
Time to begin the match!
俺の怒りに比べたら貴様の怒りなどさまつなことだ。
また一匹虫けらが死にに来たか。
Get ready!
行くぞ。
神の力を見るがいい。今夜は心地よい眠りにつくさ。何？これ皆さんぞ。何？皆さん
殺してやる。
届くものが。
行くぞ。行くぞ。
皆さん。
いいだろう。
私には通じん。ここそ受けるがいい。そうしろ。
おけばか野郎。
これならどう
無駄だ。何なんだ。すぐに終わらせてやる。
俺に指図するな。逃がさん。神の力を見るがいい。逃がさん。
許しはせんぞ。
逃がさん。調子に乗る。調子に乗るな。
さて
やっぱりやれるだけのことはやってみます。
おけばか野郎。会社どうか。会社どうか。
これで終わりにしてやる。
いいぞ。俺はスーパーベジータだ。やはり貴様の潜在能力は凄まじいな。だが俺は負けんぞ。
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess! Ready? Fight! まさ
これ以上好きにさせんぞ。お前はもう終わりだ。完全に消え去ってしまえ。形は俺が撃ってやる。どうした。この攻撃だ。そこか。この攻撃だ。生きた。油断してた。なめんじゃねえ。遅いぜ。僕も加勢します。これでも食らえ。まさに生きた。油断してたぜ。やるな。ビッグバン。すみません。よっせんな。調子に乗るな。叫んじゃねえぞ。絶対に許さん。なめんじゃねえ。こんなもんかよ。見えた。終わりじゃねえぞ。なめんじゃねえぞ。どうしたあの成果を見せてやる。
こいつはハンデだ。
こっちだ。そうだ。いっぱい飛ばすぞ。よし、今だ。
宇宙の塵にしてやる。
なんだ。逃がさないぞ。やったぜ。これでも少しは腕を上げたんだからさ。
By improving and increasing the number of assists available in the game, you're going to find more people with tactics that relied on specific rarer assist types for which their characters, they weren't willing to play that person in their team. For example, Gotenks Assist is a specific form of lockdown that can be used in one of two ways. The first is if you know that you have a move with a long animation, but also potentially with a long startup, that you need to use, and it will get you close to your opponent, or it will get you some form of advantage. You call Gotenks at the beginning so that your opponent can't afford to move in a way that will actually stop you from doing this move. Now they can jump out of it, but a lot of the time this isn't really dangerous for you, as many of the attacks that can be launched from the air downward can be countered in some other way. One good example is when Gotenks is used with Broly, and Broly has his shield up. Most characters don't have a way to deal with Gotenks being called at a specific timing that will help get Broly close to the opponent. The other more complicated way to use Gotenks Assist is to use it when you know that you've slammed your opponent into the ground with one of your other moves, and they're going to try to recover up at wherever. You don't actually care. The difficulty there is the timing, but you can absolutely call Gotenks at the moment that you see their recovery animation, because he's going to target based on where they are when they land, basically, giving you time to get close to them without any chance whatsoever of them doing too much other than using their meter for attack. If they do use their meter and you get used to the idea that they're going to, the first part is that most people, if they're recovering backward, don't even get to hit you anyway unless you charge forward really fast, and other people you can just block because you know that they're likely to use this simply because they're under pressure and don't want to be.
で終わりにしてやる。
Meaning that even if you don't have a good combo follow-up for things like your air down smash or just a move you have that does slam the opponent down but doesn't actually do much else, for example, Spear of that, you can learn a timing in which to call Gotenks Assist specifically to hold the opponent in place, or rather to prevent them from doing anything while you reposition yourself. Now this is something you can do with nearly any assist that can actually reach far enough. But beam assists tend to have a few different drawbacks relative to the Gotenks one. It makes it a little bit easier. Since Gotenks can target the air, even characters who can recover into the air and then do a move to keep them floating there and therefore avoid the beam, still fall prey to the Gotenks assist setup. But that moment you've just seen is a good use for beam assists. Aerial characters like Gotenks who have moves that are based on pushing the opponent back to a particular position, knowing that their character is going to land and probably it's at least not their turn anymore. A beam assist prevents any forward movement, and even if it doesn't completely work, it buys Gotenks time to go back on offense without having to worry about being disadvantaged at all. Does that mean that there's no better way to use the assist if they give a different one? It's hard to judge that, but there is definitely a purpose that you can devote your assist to if you understand the properties of your other characters. Even those few assists that are mostly just confusing and don't seem to have any offensive application at all, such as Android 18's barrier, can be used to cover movement in neutral in ways that many other things can't, particularly to counter other people's assists with similar concepts. If you know your opponent has gone up into the air and you are reaching the end of block stun on their, let's say, down blast move, if you mash her assist, eventually you will get her to come out and you can dash out of things and possibly she'll just absorb the blast from their assist. This is something that comes up in a lot of situations, in fact. You can counter other people's attempts to use their assist to control space with your own, assuming your assist is one of those defensive ones. Is this worth it to you? That's a question of how much you get out of either advancing or retreating. But considering whether or not you can use it at all isn't usually a big question, simply because when you're in that situation, you haven't reached a point of being able to confirm into a combo yet. You're about to probably play neutral for a short time, giving your assist time to recharge, and your main goal would be to make sure that your opponent doesn't win neutral.
Are you ready?
暇つぶしにはなったな。どうしたのだ、さっきまでの勢いが。笑えよ。
Should be a great fight! Are you ready? Let's go!
The more one uses one's assists in neutral, of course, the more used you get to the probable outcomes of them succeeding. And that can be really helpful in terms of conversions and big damage later. This can also help you mess with your opponent's expectations in various ways. and save you some meter in other ways.
なかなかやるじゃないか。そんなもんかよ。なめんじゃねえ。あっせえ。叫んじゃねえぞ。
One of our bots is specifically aimed around the idea of using your assist to cover a space that you are about to exit, and therefore your opponent can try to occupy it. But, of course, this doesn't pay off too much unless you can make some conversion out of that scenario that you just created. The bot itself, therefore, offers multiple characters where you need to be able to do this. One very short, one medium-sized, and one quite tall. We've been hearing that some of the fuzzier things related to tall characters have been removed from the game, but it's more likely not all of them, simply because the spacings and hurt and hitboxes can only be changed a certain amount before it starts to either look silly or not really work. Though we're more so expecting removal of things just like specific fuzzy guard setups. Another good use for certain types of assists, especially the ones that just hit quickly, is to treat them, assuming they have fast enough startup, as a punish for those scenarios where you're not sure if your opponent is setting you up or if they're actually minus. Given your timings, you can often hit both your button, as in the attack button you think that will punish the move, and your assist button at basically the same time, depending on the move's properties. Your assist button shouldn't necessarily trigger a super or anything, meaning that you probably get covered, especially if your assist starts from behind you. This is one thing that's definitely going to become more and more prevalent when changes happen, simply because there are more moves in the game like that than nearly every other type of move. And if assists are based on moves the characters naturally have, which is extremely likely, you're going to see a lot more of it. Whether or not this is something that most people actually want to use is a different question, because it's not a highly effective strategy a lot of the time. It would imply that you were forced onto defense and that you had the availability of that specific assist to begin with. Most people want to avoid that situation entirely, and therefore it doesn't come up a lot in their practice.
Time to begin the match! It's all or nothing! Fight it out!
こ
Well, most of us, of course, learn at least some of how to make our conversions from standard moves that we use. It can be a lot harder, given the extra layer of thought involved in doing this with an assist while your own main character is moving. To be put, most of us would not easily be able to play two different characters at the same time in any game, even if our coordination or the commands for the characters were separate enough that it was possible to do so physically easily. Mentally, we'd still mostly find ourselves not living up to the challenge. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do things such as play two characters at once, and this is absolutely the same thing.
Get ready for a Dragon Ball Rumble! Get ready! Fight it out! Amazing!
まあまあだな。よくもコケにしてくれたな。任せてください。叫んじゃねえぞ。行かないぞ。どうだ。
This is actually the absolute reason why we generally suggest if you have bought training time and don't have a specific wish to play Street Fighter or Unist, but would like to work on things like awareness rather than matchups or execution in a specific game, this is the game to use. If you own it, you probably only have to worry about one bot input, and from there it's just adjustments. You could try any number of characters or combinations. We do have even a few that we could suggest if you wanted that don't have anything to do with what's on the site and serve purposes similar to our Nash bot, forcing you to deal with your autopilot. The main reason most of those are not there is because we don't have developed versions of them for when you don't have the DLC characters involved, and that usually is a little limiting. Still, it's in there if you're the type of person who plays this game consistently and has those options. Use it for that. It has a lot of things you can do for yourself in terms of understanding your own flow and your ability to see, track information, and come up with strategies that have multiple layers rather than just, is my character going to beat your character in this space or not? Even if you find yourself feeling as if this game moves really fast, fighting just about any bot for a while will reduce this feeling. The only problem is that it then makes other move games feel too slow and you might need to get a little bit of time with them in order to get back to the correct speed for them. But it's definitely not insurmountable. And we've had lots of different people test the bots in order to verify this.
Get ready for a Dragon Ball Rumble!
One aspect of, let's call it the old system, the one you're seeing now and the one that's about to go away, that is definitely limiting, no matter how you look at it, is simply the fact that some assists have much stronger functions when used for certain things. A good example is Frieza's assist, which basically just exposes space in front of you. This is not really that good for offense, as you tend to get hit while trying to activate it while on the way in with Frieza. You can do it, but it tends to break your own rhythm, and you have to get extremely good at doing this, and your opponent obviously takes that pause to just block. So unless you have a good setup that relies on your opponent blocking, you may not be able to do anything. But not many characters have setups that are specifically based around the opponent blocking. Left-right mix-ups and similar, even then, you would still have some trouble utilizing Frieza's assist correctly for offensive purposes. Meaning that one of the things you end up doing is making sure that when you build a team, all of the assists have different functions, but that means that since each character only has one assist, you may entirely consider playing one of two characters that you like, but the one that you like less because their assist is better for supporting the other two characters on your team. And that aspect will be one of the first things you will see go away. This isn't something you're as likely to see, for example, with Omni Rabbit, because his characters tend to be very balanced, but we may end up seeing at some point different Vegeta assists from Kazuki Dynasty, simply because if you wanted a lockdown, which is partially what Vegeta Assist is doing, and you are using Bardock, who is functionally the best at advancing, then you've already got a lockdown. You can just call Kid Buu instead, meaning that Vegeta might want to serve a different role in the same matchup. Or, if you really felt as if it was important, you could switch both of them to more offense-based assists if you wanted to go really ham on Bardock, and just completely forfeit the situation once he does get put on the defensive. As you can tell, neither move does a very good job of helping Bardock get out of bad situations. You would be relying on your skill with Bardock the character in footsies, and that is something that players do now, but it limits their options already. If you cannot play a character in a particular way well enough, complementing that character's abilities other than that with an assist that helps you with it can really shift things around, meaning that if you get more options for assists with the characters you do have, you may be able to strengthen a character on your team, or at least strengthen yourself when that character is on the screen, by changing the assist of one of your other characters to basically back them up twice instead of only once. Theoretical ways of improving don't necessarily help a whole lot if you can't execute them, but still for various reasons want to play the character you're playing. Of course, all of this might just be taken care of by you being able to switch to the character that you wanted to play more, because now that character's assist can be made to be the same as the character you started with. One example of this is if you decided to play Adult Gohan because you needed a defensive assist and not Goku because Super Saiyan Goku because the beam was not going to help you, or vice versa. If you played Goku just because the uppercut wasn't helping you do whatever you wanted to do. If they give Gohan the ability to use a beam style assist, even if the move is not specifically that strong or good, it will allow you to place Gohan on the team in place of Goku just to make sure that the situation stays the way you want, but you're getting to play a character you're more comfortable with.
どうした？エリア、見えてるぞ。カメハメ。すみません。クリーンさん。なんだ。いや。飛ばす。成果を見せて。どうだ。
貴様が相手。このベジータ様セルがいい。このベジータ様を失望させるなよ。このベジータ様ないぞ。
俺が直々に相手をしてやろう。カンナ
これから見せるのが本当の力だ。どっちだ。私たちからは逃げられない。
調子に乗るな。カンナ
今夜は心地よい眠りにつけさ。
調子に乗るな。
こっちだ。
王さんの体を使って悪さなんてさせないぞ。クリリンさん、引退しても力は衰えていないな。僕も見習わなくちゃ。
Time to begin the match! Are you ready? Fight!
殺したもう終わりか。楽しめそこにくじ引き 邪魔だ。いいだろう。無駄だ。そろそろ。
こんなもんかよ。叫んじゃねえぞ。まあまあだな。遅いぜ。ここは譲ってやる。
こんなものか。ここを見ている。ビッグバンがしまった。こんなものか。ビッグバンがこんなものか。いやすぐに終わらせてやる。メタバーこの私にバリーを払わせてやる。そんなバカな。クズめ。いいだろう。血祭りにやめてやる。クズが何なんだ。
こんなもんかよ。叫んじゃねえぞ。
殺してやったんぞ。
こんなもんかよ。遅いぜ。なめんじゃね
楽しめそう。
え。絶対になんだしね。まあまあだな。
さてくらえ。この私にバリーを払わせて。
敵は俺が撃ってやる。
Get ready for a Dragon Ball Rumble!
これでいいんか。
悟空さん、全力でいきます。Ready? Let's go!
これならどうだ。
マセン
僕も加勢します。
クリリンさん、この攻撃から交代できますか。
パペックス。こっちだ。 これならどうだ。俺が直々に相手をしてやる。どうした？許さんぞ。なんだと？調子に乗るな。なんだ逃がさん。逃がさん。すみません。クリアさん。働き者がなんだと？逃がさん。
It can in part be harder to make your comebacks based on which characters you lose first and the flow of whether or not you've lost assists. Even having a character down to extremely low health may not matter as much if your purpose with that character is for their assist to support your offense. If you find yourself with your most offense-based character having either enough meter to do something on their own, or at least one assist of the type that helps them keep their offense going, you can overwhelm players who would otherwise beat you in neutral simply by getting the advantage and holding it for as long as you can. We expect to see more of that as the game progresses now, because there will be more characters used in such a way that their assist is meant to help with offense. This is also why, if you really want to do well in this game in tournament settings where there's lots of different opponents, it can be better to master the same sorts of skills that Goichi does and learn to defend through nearly everything. Many players play the game because it's simply the easiest experience they can get, build up a lot of skills in keeping their offense going, not as much in neutral or scrambles. And when find someone who can actually defend their way out of that to get back to those situations, are often at a disadvantage even if they picked assists that do something else in neutral. If you focus too much of your assist plans on the offense part though, you lose them in terms of assists, both because you can't call them anymore, but simply because if you are playing neutral against someone who's fast enough at closing space and taking advantage, they're going to delete those characters when you end up calling them, baking other people into it, especially given the fact that people who are particularly good at neutral often have good timing for Dragon Rush and therefore will snap out the character that you want to do the offense with, it means that the control of the flow becomes more important. We expect to see a lot more talk about how to get good combos that snap the opponent out, so that you don't have to deal with offensive characters blitzing everyone down.
もう少し楽しませてくれると思ったが、見込み違いだったようだな。
Should be a great fight! Are you ready? Fight it out!
こんなものバーそこだ点数をつけるとすれば調子に乗るなサイヤ人の底力を侮るなよ
大丈夫ですか？
こんなものかくそこの俺様がここを見ているそんなバカな
俺が撃ってやる。こんなもんかよ。任せてください。俺が相手だ。行くぞ。トライだ。俺がやってやら。どうだ。どうだ。なめんじゃねえ。見えた。修行の成果を見せてやる。俺の本気見せてやる。なめんじゃねえ。よくもコケにしてくれたな。全力でいくぞ。そんなまあまあいい加減にしてください。さあこだ。どうした？なめんじゃねえ。俺はバーダック。人違いだ。下級とはいえサイヤ人なんだ。この俺をなめるなよ。
Get ready for a Dragon Ball Rumble! Ready? Fight!
楽しめそう俺が殺してやろう。なんなんだ 死ね。いいだろう。無駄だ。勝負の始まりだ。無駄だ。惜しかったな。さてかい。この強靭なネクタイ当てるものなくさて無駄だ。破れるとは。スピードが自信があるんだ。
Brace yourself for the coming battle! It's all or nothing! Fight it out!
We have recently been using an end time of 9:30 Eastern for our Kame House streams. For for various reasons. In fact, we've got some changes upcoming to our streaming in general. We have new information about different people's schedules. It changes around this time of year, and there may be less streaming as a whole going forward. What we expect is that you'll definitely see almost all of the same content types, especially for the rest of this month, with a bigger change around the time that we go into daylight savings time, since, as you know, not everyone is actually in the same place in the first place, and despite daylight saving time being the same for a lot of people, it does change some other things relative to shifts, availability, other stuff. So you can expect some minor announcements about changes to our stream schedule, one way or for another. But for tonight, expect another 9:30 or so end time for this stream, which means if you do want to join it, head on in now.
点数をつけるとすれば30点とところだ。今度は俺が相手です。この攻撃からビッグバンアタック。調子に乗るな。これでどうだ。終わらせてやる。バーニング合戦だ。そのままだ。よっしゃ。シュート。間に合って。よっよっ。調子に乗るな。こんなもんかよ。遅いぜ。油断してたぜ。まだいける。そこか。この攻撃が効いた。待てよ。なめんじゃねえ。そこか。この攻撃が見てもらおう。遅いぜ。まあまあだな。俺が撃ってやる。
これがスーパーサイヤ人ブルーだ。
僕も加勢します。
One thing you can do, based on all these changes to assist, is probably manage to keep more of your meter by the time you're left down to one character, even if you're not doing that well. If you're able to keep up with the opponent but just can't quite get there, managing to get up to 4 or 5 points of meter means usually you will be having your level 1 super available, or at least to manage to get out of certain situations. This allows you to prolong neutral for as long as possible, especially if you happen to be good at it. And you don't even have to necessarily do anything with the meter directly, since you can have the opponent convinced that you're going to use the meter, and you can work on your other escapes in the same sorts of situations. Basically, people will be more likely to try to bait your use of the meter so that they can punish you, but you can use this to dash out of certain situations against certain characters, reset to neutral, and then end up using your meter in a different way later, or get them frustrated a bit and use it in a scramble, Or if you just get lucky and they finally are tired of waiting you out and you're never using it, and that happens to be the time you choose to actually use it.
Brace yourself for the coming battle! Are you ready?
これならどうかんな
地球ごと消えてなくね
孫悟空
自信がある
なんだ
カメハメハ
皆さん俺が役べるとはオラが相手だ
さてさてカメハメハさて許しませんぞカメハメハまだまだ無駄ださてかい無駄だそろそろ無駄ださてと
オラの出番だまだ
この私にバリーやる では諸君、ごきげんよう。私の本気をここまで引き出すとは。だが全力はこんなものではないぞ。
It's time to face your opponent! It's all or nothing! Fight!
油断してたぜ。許さんぞ。叫んじゃねえぞ。ここを見ていく。なめるぜ。逃がすか。これで終わりだ。この俺が本気無駄だ。やろう。大丈夫か。来た。許さんぞ。この俺様が。行くぞ。飛べ。点数をつけるとすれば無駄だ。なめるなよ。逃がすか。どうした。点数をつけるとすればそんなバカな。これから見せるのが本当の力だ。なめんじゃねえ。遅いぜ。絶対に許され。僕もコケにしてくれたな。こんなもんかよ。すみません。叫んじゃねえ。遅いぜ。絶対に許され。絶対に許され。ここだ。 やるじゃん。
Krillin! Win!
これでも少しは腕を上げたんだからさ。
Get ready for a Dragon Ball Rumble! It's all or nothing! Fight it out! Counter! Amazing! Counter!
これならどうだ。
どこへ行くんだ。邪魔だ。いいだろう。この私にバリーをしてやる。くだら
私を待たせる。愚かな。終わりだ。素晴らしい。調子に乗るな。届き者が。終わりだ。
スピードに協力してもらう。
調子に乗るな。
Part of the challenge of adaptation for players who are good at footsies in other games has to do with the way that footsies is played in this game. Specifically, most characters don't need to walk forward and be unguarded exactly in the moment they choose to use their longer crouching medium attack, which is a more common theme in other fighting games. You have to walk forward before you can actually use this medium. The move is not normally hard to punish if you block it at the right time, but the idea is to catch the opponent moving or wanting to do something with this and then start your own stuff. Meaning that if you never put yourself at risk due to your own crouch medium sliding you forward or attacking in the case of Kid Buu or similar without your opponent even being able to see you move, you get a relatively large advantage. This is normally beaten by the fact that you can often hit your crouch light followed by your crouch heavy in this when you want to play footsies in that way. The standard thing you're trying to do in most situations in other games is to clip your opponent's legs with your own crouch medium, especially one of them that actually isn't necessarily a low but is advantaged. It's there when you think you're going to hit either way because your opponent isn't going to be blocking. And then from there you go into the conversion. In this game, 2L does not move you forward, so it does not put you in a situation where you're likely to be in a bad space, but if your opponent tries to respond to it, there's a decent chance that they're going to either get whiff punished or beaten out by your 2H following. This does not work for all characters because obviously not every character has a move set that moves them in the way required for this job, but those that do tend to be better at footsies.
The battle's about to start. Good luck! It's all or nothing. Fight!
なかのもんだろ。僕も加勢します。こちらよっ。やったぜ。こう見えていくつも死闘を繰り広げてきたんだ。舐めてもらっちゃ困るぜ。
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess! Ready? Go!
絶対に許される。そんなもんかよ。出てきやがれ。なめんじゃねえ。これならどうだ。まあまあまあまあ。そんなもんかよ。
選手交代だ。捕まれ。
これならどうだ。
点数をつけるとすればそこだ。宇宙の塵にしてやる。こんな白骨野郎だ。
難しい。ビッグバンここを見ている。
点数がこんなものか。貴様にとっては所詮借り物。
ハイパーフラッグはショートケーキ。よっと。
そら。
甘い甘い。
この
んなものか。なめるなよ。
これならどうだ。
見て見て、すっごいだろ。俺たちのこと褒めてくれてもいいんだぜ。
We go now into our last match of the night, both on and off stream. This lounge will be ending at the end of stream. You can join us tomorrow for our Helena bot, which was delayed due to Seth bot's release. But in this case, we're going to be having Helena bot coming out soon enough. Next week, Monday, we will always have our Mishmashing Battle Lounge for Street Fighter V. And next Tuesday, most likely another UNIST, or in this case unclear, Tuesday training. Wednesday content is as usual undecided, but Thursday should definitely bring us back to Kame House to take a look at all of the new things you will find in Dragon Ball FighterZ. If you would like to find any of the bots we've been discussing, you can find them on our website 2-mk.org. The DBFZ one in particular can be found at DBFZ-bots, even though technically you're only inputting one set of inputs for Dragon Ball FighterZ, and just changing the ratios and opponent characters in order to make it work. Other bots can of course be found on their other pages. Our UNIST bots will probably be copied over to an Unclear bot page, but since the game is expected to have quite a few changes, we're not absolutely sure yet. And of course, the ability to choose assists may open up a few things for bots of this game, possibly allowing us to use things even when you are not actually in possession of DLC characters. At the very least, we can expect to see more work done on almost all forms of bots except the Street Fighter ones. And even they still require a little bit of poke and push with the recent update to Championship Edition. The actual bots were checked though, so we're talking about new ones that have additions due to something new becoming available, more so than changes that most of them need in order to remain functional. After all, you can always just use them however they were before, with our main note on that matter being our claw bot, which has already been changed. As for when we are streaming, as I mentioned, we will be changing some of that going forward as well. You can find out that information on any given stream day on our Twitter 2_MK_FGC, which is also where you can usually find the information on how to join the stream or the lounge if it's that type, one with a passcode that you have to actually get or some form of invite and you don't have access to a stream chat to use. If you're not a Twitter user but do have any questions about bots or anything about our content really, you can use the contact page on the website to reach us if you need to. Twitter DMs are more likely to be responded to at around the times that stream is about to start because that's when we check Twitter. But with this intense thing, we are coming up to the end. That said, Brawly is pretty good at holding his own against all sorts of situations, so it could still go on for a little bit. Either way, this has been Rillian for Team 2MK. And the stream will close up whenever this match ends. Good luck with your training, and good night, everyone.
Win! ちょっとは様になったかな。